G'day, worshippers of Nagash. It is the coach here. I hope you are all rising from the dead, resummoning, and all the good deathy stuff. I'm here with Alex Gonzalex from In Your Face podcast, and I almost butchered that. I literally just said, Alex, how do I pronounce your last name? Because we don't have a lot of Hispanics, and we don't have that general community in Australia. I was saying to Alex, please get some more authentic people to my community. I would love some Tex-Mex. I'd love some Mexican food. Give me those black tortillas. But no, in all seriousness, we're here to talk Soulblight. And there's a couple of reasons why we're revisiting Soulblight, despite, I've got to do a whole bunch of Stormcast videos. I've got to do a whole bunch of Auric videos. But Soulblight was one of the first videos I did for 3rd edition. And I think we've learned a lot, Alex. When the Soulblight Book 3 first come out at the back end of 2nd edition, a lot of people poo-pooed on it. A lot of people thought this is rubbish. And then we got to 3rd edition and we're like, oh, some of these things make sense. Blood Knights can do some things now. Yeah. And you have been kicking some serious ass. You went 5-0 at SoCal Open. You've been doing pretty well competitively. And I thought we'd have a chat.
Yeah. Well, I play every Death Army except for Feck. I'm not a really big Bretonnia fan. And, I have done very well in the past with Night Hunt and OBR and, formerly Legions of Gash, but now Soulblight. I mean, you mentioned talking about Soulblight at the start of 3.0. Soulblight Allegiance ability, of course, disappeared in 3.0. And that was my very, very first competitive army, specifically Soulblight Allegiance, 23 model army, just 15 Blood Knights, 9 Vargeist, 27 model army, 9 Vargeist, and then Vampire Lords, 2 Vampire Lords and 1 Zombie Dragon. But there's a lot of, the army is really, really big when it comes to a roster for the most part. And the good thing with that is there's a lot of flexibility on how you can build a list.
Yeah, it's a great army, and it's one of those ones like Cities of Sigmar that there's so much variety and units and different ways of building it. Cities of Sigmar is my home away from home, and the way I look at a unit will change depending on if it's in Hallowheart, if it's in Greywater Fastness, and I think that the same is true with Legions of Nagash. And I remember actually when Soulblight was very first come out, my friend Deke, I actually did a video with Deke, and he used to hit me with like waves of Blood Knights, and they used to be able to regenerate with their banner. So he'd always like retreat them, come back, bring them back. He was a jerk. That we're talking 3rd edition. We won't talk about Deke. He's a jerk. We'll talk 3rd edition Soulblight, and you've obviously got an expanded roster, and a lot's changed. There's monster stuff happening, new command points. You've got new monsters, like Belladama and Radicus, and there's just so much going on. So I want this is almost like a continuation of the video I did with Matt Tyrrell, but it's more like we've had 4 or 5 months now of actual practice. We've had 4 months. This is insane. We are almost. This is insane. With so much games, what have you learned? So
what have I learned?
Let's start. Like, what have you found with Soulblight in these first 3 to 4 months of Age of Sigmar 3?
Well, with Soulblight, that's pretty much been the only army I've played in 3.0 so far. I was right until the very end of 2.0. I was still trying to kick butt with my Night Hunt, doing okay with that. But they got a little shafted than initially OBR did as well. With Soulblight, I was a little all over the place. Now, in the United States, I have had a lot of experience traveling and playing a lot of events. And my good friend, the only person that I regularly play games with, person to person, is Jeremy Vessier, the French overlord, current team captain, Team USA.
He's a team captain now.
Yes, he is. And he and I like to practice against each other a lot, right? Obviously. And 2019 ITC season, he got first in ITC, I got second. And so like it goes to show like all that practice really paid off. But he likes to, I don't think it's intentional, but he certainly likes to go, oh, I don't agree personally with your list idea. So now I'm going to build a list that screw with that list, which is good. But it's also can be disheartening about what you want to try and how you want to try it. But it always does make sense. Like he's really good with what he does. So when Soulblight first came out, I was like everyone else, and I went, sweet, Blood Knights. I want my heavy armored mounted vampires, and now I can actually play with them, and they're relevant now. But they, they are what, 15 wounds, 3-up save, which is cool, but they can still die not to a stiff breeze, but to a lot of, a little storm, right? And they can't come back unless you bring the life swarm, and if it even then, there's only a 33% chance. So they don't really, they hit hard, but they don't hit as hard as other things. So I started to warm up a lot to the Graveguard, and oh boy, did I realize the error of my ways pretty quickly. I mean, there's something to be said about moving away from things like being able to retreat and do mortal wounds, and also kind of hit kind of hard on the charge. But Graveguard consistently, whether they charge or get charged, if they don't die in one go, they are usually, even a small number of them still left, are still doing a lot of damage right when they get in. So that was one of the big takeaways that I had when I, between the start of 3.0 and today. In addition to that, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but in my own opinion, unless you're running all Blood Knights and doing Kalistari Dynasty, there's not a lot of wiggle room well, in my opinion, competitively, unless you build an explicit list for the other ones like Legion of Night and Legion of Blood and Avangori. I mean, there are lists I think that exist there, but you have to you don't have a lot of flexibility compared to, say, Vyrkos.
Yeah, and Vyrkos, I think when I look at, who's doing well competitively across the world, it's consistently Vyrkos. And there has been some build, there's heavy Graveguard builds. I've seen people running lots of zombies. I've seen those all Blood Knight lists. I've seen those really heavy, Vampire Lord and Prince Vordry type builds, with very minimal battle line. It's just run all the monsters. And then you've got the other side of the coin where it's just like lots of Vampire Lords on foots or necromancers, and there's just this undying wave of 60 zombies, 20 Graveguard, lots of skellies, always, doggos. I think people quickly poo-pooed on our direwolf friends, and I think, at least from what I'm seeing, I think people are now coming back to direwolves and realizing the consistency issue isn't as bad now that you've got to take blocks of 10 direwolves. I don't know if you've kind of feeling the same way, Alex.
So that's a good question. I mean, originally I was doing, so going to the evolution of an early 2.0 to a current, the kind of, 6 months in or 4 months in list kind of changes for me. I did not bring dogs. I only had Chadakar, and he can, of course, summon the 10 dogs in. And I had actually had 2 Vengorian Lords, and Vengorian Lords are amazing. I actually had a pair of them, which are really, really great for just locking units in. But there are certain units that they can encounter that just will kill them, which is a problem. That's why I moved back to the zombie dragon, because it hits like a brick shithouse if it makes a charge. I had just minimum units of 10 skeletons, so 3 units of 10 skeletons in my early list too, double Vengorian Lord, and then I had a White King as my general instead of something big and special like the zombie dragon. So I had my 2 units of Graveguard as battle line as well, and that was super helpful. But the Graveguard want to hit hard, and they're a little bit of a glass hammer. All too often, I would find people going, sweet, they're really easy to kill with my 2 Stonehorns right in front of them. Boom, I'm going to do Broken Ranks on that unit. And I'm like, okay, I have to deal with this now. And so being able to change things and have a more not necessarily more ablative wounds, just having a denser battle line that isn't explicitly like the zombie spam list, which is something that I'm just now considering to try to mess around with. Extra wounds and extra bodies can be super helpful. So my current list, and I'm most likely to bring into Austin, probably, it's going to be, it has 10 dogs in addition to the 2 units of 10 wolves, specifically so that you can have the circumstance of being able to, have your cake and eat it too. You have the offense, but you also have just a little bit of cushion when it comes to defense, because 10 wolves are kind of hard to move.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of why I was really excited to visit this with you, Alex, is because there has been a lot of math hammering. A lot of people are like, I'm just going to flood the board with zombies, and they're going to come back on a 2+, and then at the end of the battle round, I'm going to bring them back to half strength. And it sounds great, but you're just not seeing a lot of zombies, or you are seeing certain people take big blocks of zombies. So, I think for me, it's just like, where are you 4 or 5 months in thinking about the particular build? What are the sleeper units? People talked about Belladama, and they love Belladama, right? She's not only a wonderful model. I love the spell of being able to, do a wound to a unit, then turn it into a dire wolf, and you pin them in shooting, and it could be a way to get around Unleash Hell. But it sounds good in theory, but against Lumineth, where you probably need it, or a Daughters of Cain with Marathi, what's the likelihood? So again, this is kind of like what I really want to unpack your brains is, how are you thinking about the army? I've lost your sound, Alex. I don't know what you were doing with the shenanigans. But
sorry. I had to plug something in.
The 2021 video conferencing abilities, you're on mute.
Yes. I love Belladama, and my first list did have Belladama, and I still think she's got plenty of legs. Being able to lock down a unit to avoid Unleash Hell is fantastic, and you can just be a sliver within 3 inches, so that's super helpful too. And that's before enemy units are removed as casualties, so they can screw you a little bit on that, depending on where you place them. So you gotta be real smart about where you're putting them. But I do agree, that can be incredibly helpful. I found that there can be some challenges with Belladama just due to the fact that spell is only 18-inch range. But I think that Vyrkos overall, the fact that she and Radikar and all the other named characters for Vyrkos all count as the general in addition to, rather than just a Mortarch for the other legions or Fordhai for Calistari, makes things a little bit easier too on the Vyrkos player, since if they lose their chosen general, whether it's a vampire lord or a zombie dragon or something like that, they're not getting their free CP or something like that. So there's still a lot of usefulness with Belladama.
So let's talk about the way you're currently winning. So we mentioned at the top of the show, you went 5-0 at SoCal, which only just happened, right? It's a very recent large tournament. What has helped you win in large tournaments? Is there particular units, particular strategies? Is it the matchup? Like, how are you winning your games right now?
Great question. A little bit of everything, right? Just being able to practice and experiment with different lists can be really important just in of itself. Being able to really, really think about the armies that you're going to have to encounter and the ones that you're going to have a problem with is super helpful too. So, and sometimes even just staying humble is really important. Like going into SoCal Open, I'd only played 2 games against Sons of Behemoth yet. I'd seen them play. I'd read through all of their rules back and forth, including the White Dwarf rules, and gone, okay, I know exactly what to do if I encounter SOB. However, this is going to be really hard for me. And the problem was the practice game that I did kind of stick my neck out a little too far, partially to see how things go when I fight against SOB and I make a wrong move, which they punish you for, or at least they punished me for. So, and then my second game, it was a little bit better. And then at SoCal Open, I played against one SOB player, and I just, we had, I think maybe 4 turns before he was tabled. So, that was just because we played the Vice. So, turn 1 doesn't exist. Turn 2, maybe you're not in combat, maybe you are. He happened to stick his neck out and kill a unit of skeletons, and then I gave him a free broken ranks of the monster, and then just kind of swamped on, and then everything kind of cascaded from there. But being able to know your hard matchups and at least have a good game plan on what to do is going to be very, very helpful. Like I need a rematch against Lumineth, because last time I fought against Lumineth, it was a little bit of a challenge. And I made the wrong move. I basically lost the game due to the fact that I in the moment didn't think of something very, very obvious. So it's a little bit more.
How dare you not remember that one thing? It's like
yeah. But that's it. You just have to know your opponents and kind of know the limitations of your army too, I would say.
And that's, really important lesson for anyone, whether you are listening to this because you're a Soulblight fan or you're just listening to this because you enjoy my content. Regardless of what army, practice, 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 because the more practice that you get before a tournament, the better decisions you'll make, because you've been in a situation where you've gone, I did that worked, or it didn't work. How do I do it differently? Not on the tournament scene. And my advice to anyone as well is go find people who are playing those meta armies as well. Get experience against right now the Archaons, the Suns, Iron Jaws, especially Gorg Runners right now are going to become very popular. So if you are preparing for a large event coming up, go headhunting your community or go find people who are playing those armies. And Tabletop Simulator is a great resource for that as well. But while hopefully your sound works, because I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh, it works. I'm having just a little mini thing here, but yeah,
and Tyler mentioned it, ask lots of reps, have a lot of reps, and obviously, playing against good opponents like yourself and getting against people like Jeremy obviously really push you. And it's, that's always great, but also it's the questions you ask as well, not being afraid to ask good questions. But what I'm really interested in as well, and because you mentioned Lumineth is a bit, was a bit of a challenge for you, at least, you made some wrong decisions at the end that kind of, might have lost you the game. But some of the meta armies right now, they're all very different. You've got the Lumineth, you've got some very heavy shooting armies. Jeremy obviously is a Carriage and Overlords player, so you've got shooting from that side, but as well as like Bowsnake, Marathi, you've got Lumineth who are doing mortal wounds, you've got Cruel Boys who have a lot of shooting, especially some of the monster hunting shooting. But then on the other side, you've got some real hero hammer style armies. You've got to deal with an Archaon, you've got to deal with potentially a Nagash, a Marathi, but then you've got other things like these super durable 2-up, 3-up armor saves, and Stormcast is especially with Annihilators right now or even Vindicators dropping down. And so all of the meta armies are very different. It's almost like you can't cater to one particular style.
Yeah, so in those instances, that's the reason why I have the list that I have. Looking through even a few of the comments today, one person mentioned another limitation. Zombies and skeletons are fun, but they're just not mobile. And to that I say Gravesites. Gravesites can be an incredibly useful tool. Yes, Graveguard are incredibly slow as well, but when they can show up where I need them to be, that's very helpful. So the placement of a Gravesite can also win or lose you the game with Soulblight Gravelords. And I think that a lot of people don't really realize that until it's too late. Or maybe just don't even realize that at all and just go, well, I thought I'm putting them in the right spot. What's happening? Well, maybe you're not putting them in the right spot. You need to put the Gravesites not where exactly you want to be, but rather where your opponent isn't going to be, so it can maybe they maybe have to dedicate a normally buffer unit or a blade of wound unit now to like jump on the Gravesite to, even if it's a 50-point model, a 65 or a 65-point unit, 50-point unit, 100-point unit, if that unit's now on that Gravesite to try to block off a Gravesite, then, well, A, you have 3 more, hopefully you're using them correctly, and then B, that's 1 less unit, maybe 2 less units that you have to worry about on the objectives,
especially when you start putting, because the temptation is to put a Gravesite near an objective, right? And your opponent can sit on it and kind of deny you both returning from the Gravesite or, summoning from the Gravesite, but also then sitting on the objective. But I always found, because I used to play Legion of Night, and, that was ultra kind of shenanigans because you put some things into Deep Strike, as well as you've got the Gravesites as well. So you've got 2 different versions of the summon or the coming in from reserve. And I always found I'd always have 1 or 2 Gravesites that I was never going to use, but I'd put them in a place that my opponent couldn't ignore them, because the minute that they ignore them, I had the threat of summoning in their backfield, getting into their juicy hero, stealing an objective. But in my mind, I never really thought about using it. I'm like, well, I was going to put it there as a threat, and the opponent would stretch themselves, leave something back or whatever. But you're right, like the radius, and thinking about not where do I want to summon, but like where's the possibility, and how do I make sure that when I want to bring something from the Gravesite, I've got space.
Yeah, I mean, putting the gravesite, deciding what units you're going to put in the gravesite can be very, very, very helpful. And they do take the same rules as Stormcast Eternals, which a lot of people, or not necessarily Stormcast Eternals, Night Haunt, etc. You can only put as half the unit in the grave or in the gravesite as you do, on the table. So, for context, I put, sometimes you want to kind of trip up your opponent and go, okay, cool. I only have my heroes on the table and 2 other units, or maybe 1 other unit. I have 4 drops in the gravesite. I have 4 drops on the table, and so then they're just like, well, they can come up anywhere over here. And if you outdrop them, then they're going to be even more concerned. They're going to go, okay, they can potentially go in turn 1 and maybe pin my entire army down. That's a problem. So being able to use the grave sites in a correct fashion is so powerful. But of course, hypermobile armies that can be anywhere at once can easily invalidate that. You mentioned Jeremy playing KO. Technically he's got like every army except for Seraphon, I think. So
I just know him as KO. Like that's where I see him probably playing. At least that's my perception of Jeremy.
Well, see, now I have to deal with the Stormcast, which is going to be a new problem. So got to deal with Hallowheart, taking full advantage of the Stormkeep mechanic. So a lot of MSU, I think, is going to be the next movement. But being able to make sure that you can be where you need to be is going to be very important. And actually, you mentioned that you played Legion of Night, right?
Yeah. I used to play. I played old, like in the Legions of Nagash. I played Knight. And it was always fun because, like, what I would always do, and I would terrorize. I love the psychology of the Legion of Night. Is I'd always have a Terrorgeist, and a Terrorgeist and an unmounted Terrorgeist, and I'd have it on the side of the table, and it was always my last drop. And I'd always, because at the time you could only have 3 in reserve, where now the update is 1 for 1, and I'd always have the Terrorgeist, and in my mind it was always going on the table. But in my opponent, they didn't want it. They didn't want the Terrorgeist to be coming in from reserve in their backfield. And, you watch them how they deploy and they try to avoid that Terrorgeist coming into you when you've still got all these other things on the table. So you can do some really interesting psychological games using the grave sites as well as coming in from reserve.
Yeah. It's Legion of Night is an army that I have not yet messed with, but I mean, that goes into a very powerful unit that already has mechanics that are kind of janky in that same way. The good old Mannfred, my least favorite character fluff-wise in anything AOS or fantasy, but oh boy, is he so helpful for being able to be like, you know what? I don't want to be in this combat anymore. Oh, you have an unprotected objective. Well, now I have that,
Can I pause you on Mannfred for just a second? I just want to finish off the gravesite piece, because I know a few people in the chat and people have talked to me in the past. Is like, how do I put down my gravesite? Because you referred to it a few times correctly. How do I correctly place my gravesites? And because of terrain density and the types of armies we play, whether it's going to be you outdrop them, they outdrop you, the layouts, where I used to put my gravesites would vary depending on, again, my opponent, the mission, if I wanted to go first, if they were to go first. What are some of the considerations, or if you were going to teach me how to deploy my my grave sites, what advice would you give me, or at least some considerations depending on the styles of opponents?
Yeah. I would say most of the time you don't need to go super deep into your opponent's backfield. I would always recommend keeping 2 of them near each other, maybe let's say 18 inches away from each other if you're going to put them in the backfield. Otherwise, really don't try to do that. You are limited, right? So 2 of them can be placed anywhere. 2 of them, have to be put within your territory. In the missions where the territory is 50-50, then put them all in the middle, maybe 2 in your territory, 2 in your opponent's territory, as close to the border as possible. I think that in those instances, those are very helpful. But like spreading them out, now that I say that, it's probably not 18, probably more like 24 inches away from each other. It's probably a good move. But being able to, in the other missions where you're a little limited, right? Like you are maybe territory that's 11 inches up, then in those instances, you would probably want to, of course, keep your two grave sites in the territory, maybe equal distance towards the objectives as you can, with each other right on the border, since it is a 1 millimeter circle. And then on top of that, you would probably want to string down at least one objective in the middle, maybe closer to halfway up the board if there's no objectives there, and then one more maybe in your opponent's territory. But being able to flirt with getting close to your opponent's territory is helpful, because maybe you need, roll a 5 up and everything you need is still on the table, but you lost a unit of skeletons or something like that. Well, you can plop them in, you move something on over to your opponent's territory, and that's a good way to get Savage Spearhead, right? Yeah. So being able to harass your opponent in that way and get those extra points on, or those points on the battle tactics without them expecting it is really useful. The one kind of cardinal sin I would say to avoid at all costs is to put your gravesite anywhere within. I mean, you have to be within outside of an inch of a piece of terrain and an objective. I would recommend not even being within 3 inches of an objective. Maybe not even 6 inches of an objective. I would put yourself no more than maybe just about 6 inches near an objective, if not farther away. If you can be 9 inches away from your opponent and still put half the unit of, say, skeletons, zombies, graveyard, etc., on the objective, that's super helpful.
Bingo, that is the key. And that's always been, because I would do a very aggressive Legion of Night build, and you've got to think about the objective marker, but your center point, but then also the radius. So you're right, you want to make sure that you've got as many options as possible to bring up that unit. And terrain does impact you. I always kind of looked at it like a diamond. That was like always my default. It never was like an exact diamond, but I'll always try to have one in my opponent's territory, 1 in mine, and then 2 on the flanks. I never wanted to put it in the center of the board, because that's often where the combat happens. And for me to bring back, to do things in the middle, unless I was like a 1-drop, I would never do it. It was almost like a throw that gravesite in the bin. But having something on the flanks, especially when you have Mannfred, Neferata, a Vampire Lord on Zombie Drag, something that's fast, you can kind of swing around and you can kind of manipulate things a little. But I know that's changed as well, because back in the day you needed your general to bring back from the gravesite. Now you're a lot more flex. So that's probably how I was thinking about it.
Yeah. And on top of that, there was the FAQ, right? In the rule book, it says you can only bring a unit back at the end of your battle shock phase. Then in the book, in the battle tome, it's that way. In the FAQ, it just says in any player, or in the battle shock phase. So I'm like, all right, if that's the way it's going to be, I'm not going to complain. I will say one final thing with the grave sites. It has been an issue that I find a lot of other Soulblight Gravelord players having. And a friend of mine who's playing Soulblight Gravelords and struggling, I literally just took his General's Handbook and got a pen, got their permission, of course, and just kind of drew in on their General's Handbook where they should be putting them in any one mission. So it's like, okay, this one, this one, this one, this one. And of course, it doesn't always hold true depending on the matchup, but for the most part, generally, the diamond, the square, etc.
Yeah, especially if I'm going to lose. And I think the reason I wanted to pause you on that for a second, Alex, was because I didn't want to skip over it, because it's something that I think a lot of people, it's through trial and error you learn where to put the gravesite. And, it's almost like deployment, right? You got to practice your deployment. You got to practice where you put your gravesite, because it is a resource that you are going to be able to leverage, and you want to make the most of that resource. The other consideration, obviously, and we'll get back into Mannfred, because I do want to pick your brains on Mannfred, and the Mortarch that everyone loves because he brought Age of Sigmar to the people.
Yeah,
he did nothing wrong. If it wasn't for Mannfred, there's no Age of Sigmar. So you got to thank Mannfred every morning. Thank you very much for Age of Sigmar. It's true. Without Mannfred, there's no Age of Sigmar. You'd be on square bases, Alex. With gravesites, the other thing as well is I always thought about, am I going first or is my opponent going first? Because if I'm a high drop and I'm not getting the choice, I'm playing more defensive, because I know my opponent could rush up, especially if I've already put a couple of units in reserve in a gravesite. That they can very easily limit where I bring them on the board. So I might kind of push them back a little bit or bring them closer to me if I don't think that I'm going to win or go first.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's just me, like, because if I know I'm going to go first, or if I feel like I've got a good chance, I can be a bit more risky. But if I'm going up against like a 1-drop or a 2-drop and I know I'm not getting the choice, the last thing I would want to do is put too many things into reserve and then lose my options of where I bring them in. You may think differently. Maybe that's just the way I look at risk versus reward.
Well, that's the way I used to do it too with with my Gravesites. I used to do one kind of like very much in my deployment in a safe spot. Now I've basically been putting 2 kind of in my zone in general, and then kind of 2 in my opponents, or 2 a little bit further up the board. So I almost want to kind of like have these islands available to myself if need be. But also, I mean, my grand strategy I've been utilizing is Predator's Domain, specifically for the fact that once most armies die, or most units in other armies, when they die, they just don't come back. Whereas ours can come back pretty frequently. So, if you have a lot of units and you start bringing up these units, you can very easily just, be like, I'm near this objective or that objective, or pardon me, this piece of terrain and that piece of terrain. And pretty quickly you can add up, just starting to swamp over. And even if you get tabled, if your opponent doesn't have a lot left and it's turn 5, well then, hey, even if you're losing, at least you got your grand strategy. So, being able to put your Gravesites in ways that are also going to be advantageous to your grand strategy can be very helpful.
No, I love it. And you mentioned battle tactics as well, popping up in the backfield and scoring Savage Spearhead and things like that. But you were talking Mannfred. You were talking about, the greatest Age of Sigmar hero known to man, and your love and professed love of him. Are you finding that a lot of people should be considering Mannfred, or is it a case-by-case situation? Like, what's your take on Mannfred?
Oh boy. I think Mannfred's really helpful. He works well in my list. I don't think he's going to work well in everyone's list. I think that if you're running Legion of Night, obviously bring him. If it's Vyrkos, it's kind of a toss-up. If it's Kalastari, you're already spending too many points. I don't recommend bringing him. He's useful in my army just because he's got a real fun mechanic that people don't really remember. I think, and it's if he's got his staff attack and he's got his sword attack, just like Neferata's got her dagger and she's got her staff, right? And Neferata's dagger, she hurts a hero. There's a 33% chance you're killing that hero at the end of the combat phase. But for Mannfred, if he kills any models with Geistivore with his sword, then all friendly Soulblight Gravelord model units wholly within 12 of him get 1 extra attack for that same combat phase. So if you jump him in and it's your turn, so you get to, kind of choose where you're charging, of course, then you don't have to worry about disappearing. You shouldn't be charging something that will clearly kill him in 1 round or 2 rounds or something like that. You go in, you do some pot shot attacks. If you're conveniently wholly within 12 with say a unit of Graveguard, and then Radikar also charged, and he popped off his command ability at the end of the charge phase. Well, then that 20-man unit of Graveguard have 80 attacks, and without the extra attack, I've had 20 Graveguard standard with the natural buffs of +1 to hit and +1 to wound near Mannfred, or the +1 to wound naturally through wholly within 9 of a Vyrkos hero, plus all that attack. I've had 1 unit 20 Graveguard do 57 damage to Mega Gargant, and that was pretty fun. So
for you, not
for me, it was fun. For me, it was fun. Yeah. So being able to remember Geistivore is, I think, probably going to be the most important thing I would have people realize. But also, if you have an opponent who has, like at SoCal Open, I had an opponent who went all out attack, basically. That his list should have been just titled all out attack. It was a Khorne Slaves of Darkness army. The guy was an experienced player in like War Machine, like a well-known figure in War Machine. However, I'm obviously not a part of that scene, but he was getting into Age of Sigmar, and he had Archaon, Khorne Demon Prince, which is exhausting to fight against if you're not a shooting army.
Yeah, half moving Demon Prince, that is a nightmare.
Yeah, half charge is the worst.
Oh yeah, half move and run and charge.
Yeah, but he had and Archaon is way less resilient in a Khorne list, but he is incredibly hurtful in a Khorne list. So he had Sever the Head. He had kill all my opponent's heroes, And near the end of the game, he realized it was impossible to get that unless I made a terrible move and charged a unit that could kill him and with a Mannfred and stay in combat, which I was never going to do. Then he would have gotten a step at the head. However, with Mannfred being able to just dip out if something really scary charges him, it's incredibly helpful. You just go, okay, cool. I don't want to be in this combat anymore. You basically have to shoot him off the table. Which even if you shoot him off the table or want to, he still moves 16 inches. He's got a 3-up save and 12 wounds. So, and ignores the first wound each phase. So,
and the other thing I love about Mannfred, and I think some people might miss this one, is that his command ability is actioned in the hero phase, not in the combat phase. So you can really get you can not only is it a great bubble, I love the Mannfred bubble, because I quickly learnt with Mannfred, don't use him like a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon or Prince Vordry. You really got to play him like he is in the lore, which was be very sneaky, be calculated, and find the little weak spots to get Mannfred in. He's great in combat. I think too many people are too quick to pull him out of combat to use the little teleporty shenanigans. I don't think it's always the right play. He is still good in combat, but you've got to really choose your battles on where you fight with Mannfred. But that command ability, being able to avoid things like Roar, because it's a hero phase command, is gold. And then the fact as well, as you mentioned, that one that giving +1 attack within 12 inches of Mannfred, that might allow you to not have to spend points for a Vampire Lord on foot to get that same ability. Or it might combine really well with the like a White King or something if you wanted to go that route. And by the way, folks, we will bring up Alex's list in the chat as well. So if anyone, Alex, you've mentioned your list a few times. Fear not, we will bring it up.
Oh yeah, of course. And no, exactly what you mentioned. You're saving a lot of time too with command points when you pop open his command ability. And it all happens at the start of the hero phase, right? So it's all at the same time. So if you get your inspiring or heroic leadership off, you roll that 4-up, well, then that you just immediately use it right then and there. That's a free one, and you can consider that a free triumph and a free all-out attack for however many units are wholly within 12, which you can fit quite a few models wholly within 12 of 120 mil oval.
We've talked a little bit about the dynasties, and we've talked a little bit about where your thoughts are. Do you think all of them right now are viable and competitive in the meta? And folks, when we talk about this, I'm not saying that if you like a particular build, it's rubbish and stop running it. I'm talking to Alex from a real competitive point of view. If you want to do well at a tournament, do you think all of the dynasties are viable, or are there a top 3, top 1?
That's a really good question. I think the only one that I really have trouble thinking of competitively is I actually hate to say it. I think it's Legion of Night. I think Legion of Blood has some. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is room, and I think that if you run an army that can literally cover the board with models and maybe even Vargeis or Mannfred plus something that can deep strike, is because of I think the command ability or a relic I think it's command ability for Legion of Night. That's incredibly helpful. However, being able to each army I've kind of thought about, right? Like with Kalistari, it's very straightforward. You can run a competitive list. It's more of a gatekeeper army if you run just all the Blood Knights and Prince Vordhai, or Prince Vordhai, another zombie dragon, and as many Blood Knights as you can fit, right? It's not going to probably win a GT. It's probably going to go maybe at best 1 or 4-1, but there are a lot of armies where if they can't deal with that, they're not getting in, right? Kind of like a Sons of Behemoth kind of situation. I think that Vyrkos has the most flexibility and you're going to see the most variety in what you're going to see with those lists. And then with Avangori, if you talked to me the start of the 2.0, I would have told you Avangori is garbage. Don't consider it. It's bad. You should feel bad. However, I've been warming up to them lately. I've been talking a little bit with a few people, and there's a lot to be said about the torment driven throws rule. Oh no, pardon me, not the torment driven throws rule. The artifact of power. What am I looking at here? It is. Oh boy.
Yeah, I have what does it do? So you've got the unhinged rampager, which is a reroll charge.
No, it's the maddening hunger. I mean, because there's not a lot of things in the game that that you can immediately just kind of point and click and slay a model, right? And Soulblight doesn't really have any of that, with the exception of that mutation. For the cursed mutation of maddening hunger, you can at the start of the combat phase pick one enemy unit, the wounds characteristic of 1. It's within 3 inches of, and that's the big kicker for me. That's the reason why I'm a little nervous.
If you do say that enemy model is slain and you can heal 1.
That's right. That's right. So you can heal 1, which is fine, but it's mainly about like picking off that thing that you don't want, picking off that squad leader, picking off that thing that keeps them in coherency, etc. So I think that there are some legs there. I haven't had the time to mess around with it. Now that
it does feel like that Avangori and even Legion of Blood. I'm not seeing a lot of Legion of Blood lists. And 2, I think it was Gulliman's point as well. Legion of Night can be counterintuitive, because that was like a real black baptism of fire for me when I was learning it, because you've got to like, when do I put things into the Gravesite? When do I put them on the side? Chronomatic cogs has changed as well, so you can't just chuck that down and get the +2 to the charge. And I found it really, because I was going very aggressive with my Legion of Night, I had gone to the Morghast Harbingers to get the 3d6 charge, because Vargeists were, at the time, Vargeists were just like often failing the charge. I never had a hero to kind of re-roll the charge. And even then, like, do I even want to re-roll a 9-inch charge? And that was always one of the struggles as well. Like, when I'm going really aggressive, even with Gravesites, popping them out, like, your White Kings, not White Kings, your Graveguard, pop them out of a Gravesite. And what's the likelihood of that charge?
Yeah. That's the issue. Being able to hopefully get your 9-inch charge is going to be helpful. And the problem, like, they thought about this army pretty well. And, unfortunately, when we see some of the newer armies, and, I'm looking at you, Stormcast, they clearly were like, well, let's balance this as much as we can. There's no real way you can get a +1 to charge successfully with, or +1, +2, +3 with Soulblight. So yeah, you do have to kind of roll the dice a little bit. But there are command abilities all over Soulblight Gravelords, free rerolling charging, like Castello Dynasty, for example. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost certain that that's a command trait for rerolling charges wholly within 12 of the general. Being able to just hopefully roll well is very important. As a Night Hunt player, I gotta say, I love that. Like, there's a gambling mechanic of just rolling for that 9-up or hopefully 10-up charge. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it screws you.
What about Nagash? Where do you think he lands? Because he's a lot of points, and OBR players are loving him back in Petrifix Elite. Like, they've done the Petrifix Elite dance. Like, it's back, baby. It is back. But is Nagash getting the same amount of love in Soulblight?
That's a great question. I think that if you were going to run Nagash in a Soulblight list, you'd probably have to do, I guess not Avangori. I guess you would want to do maybe even Legion at Night, because I think the only really good way to play him is to, and the list that I had actually concocted, I actually thought about this the other day, and I just recalculated it during this our chat today. It's at 1895, so you have 105 points to spare. But it is Nagash plus I'm looking at 160 zombies. Nagash
I was going to say it is the replica of OBR take Nagash with, potentially either with the Arcan or lots and lots of Mortek Guard, and with, +1 to the armor save through Petrifix Elite. I think you're right. I think if I was going to run Nagash, I would run it with a horde of zombies, just lots and lots of zombies, maybe a couple of necromancers for Van Hale's Dance Macabre, or maybe even like a White King or 2, but just an undying legion of just like 60 zombies each. Do I attack Nagash? Do I go for the zombies? Do I do enough damage and I'm just getting, I don't know. I think that would be kind of how I would build it. But yeah, probably not a lot of incentive in the other sides.
Well, problem is Nagash can't heal himself, at least not unless he rolls it with his spell that specifically can heal him. So whereas in OBR, he just heals himself in X number of extra units. So that's the only bummer. And in the list that I just recommend, like I just thought of, it is very much like again, another kind of gatekeepery list, right? Like, I think one person at SoCal Open, he had brought, I think one may have gotten 4-1, bringing Nagash, Belladama, I think a corpse cart, and then as many zombies
Lots
as he
of
can fit in.
was it direwolves? I remember seeing one particular list where it was like nothing but direwolves. I think it was like maybe it was a different tournament, but there was just lots and lots of direwolves instead, being that they are summonable too and just clogged up the board with their 2 wounds apiece.
That wasn't SoCal, but I have seen that. I know exactly what you're talking about. Just like clogging the board with them, and also having Belladama around to potentially bring more, and then having her being able to throw saves, throw wounds onto the dogs. It becomes obnoxious and hard to kill her. It doesn't make it impossible, but kind of makes it, a lot of things a lot more difficult for sure. Yeah, Belladama, she's a great asset, especially at 200 points. But for Nagash, it's hard for me to build a list that I like with OBR unless it's something that's so blatantly straightforward, like ton of zombies.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of other considerations. Like one thing I really liked about Belladama, and I mentioned it earlier in the show, is the magic and being able to do some damage to your Lumineth archers. Some type of shooty or some type of thing that you can't get in the backfield. And then if you're successful and you do the spell, you get to turn one of those models into a doggo, and you can then kind of start, at least restrict the unleash hell when you start going in for the attack. Because one of the things that I know people were talking about early was, do I add Fellbats? People were talking about Fellbats as the counter to unleash hell, because you don't have the ability to get to those big blocks of 30 Lumineth Sentinels. Yeah, they're Sentinels, or the 15 bow snakes with Daughters of Cain. So what do? And you want to hit them with the Vampire Lord, you want to hit them with the Blood Knights. Do you need the Fellbats? Where do you stand with Fellbats right now?
No, I don't. I mean, like, I like them. And in my old lists, I used to run, I never ran Fellbats, but I ran Bat Swarms, RIP. But like, for 10 points more, you can get 1 unit of 10 skeletons, and they count as battle line. And if you want to bring a unit out 9 inches away and try to even the re-rolling 9-inch charge, if you need to, if you really, really want to mess with them, and you know that like you're going to not fail your 3-inch charge or whatever with other units, it is probably worth it to just spend 10 points more, have a unit of 10 skellies, throw them up near the gravesite, charge them into that unit that you want to. Again, this is why gravesite placement can be very important, because if you put them in a certain way, then yeah, you can say right now what I'm saying, is situational. But if you can put your gravesites in a way where it's not situational. This is what's going to happen when you want it to. So being able to just maybe potentially throw the 10 skeletons in, probably have them die to unleash hell, and then you charge in with what you need to with the meat and potatoes. That's super duper helpful. On top of that, unfortunately, and I think that this is a bit of an oversight with the book, you can bring back Deadwalker and Death Rattle units, that are summonable. You cannot bring back summonable Fellbats. So that's 75 points that you're not getting back. At least you know that if you have an 85-point unit of skeletons, you're at least getting half that unit back potentially, even if they die.
I just know a lot of people were talking about that as a way to, because the minute they saw Unleash Hell, they're like, right, I'm charging up my Blood Knights, I'm charging up that Vampire. The last thing I wanted to do is have a whole bunch of wounds chipped off it. How do I handle that? And I know that was one of the ways people were talking about it, at least early on. But I guess what I'm hearing from you, those points are better spent maybe somewhere else.
I think that spending your points purposefully to avoid Unleash Hell isn't helpful, because you could go to a tournament, right? And if it's like a really, really, really big tournament, or if it's basically more than 40 people, 50 people, 60 people, you could go all 5 rounds and not see a shooting army. Then what are those Fellbats doing? The Fellbats aren't doing really much of anything.
They could help. You could score Savage Spearhead with it. They are a good screen because they're not battle line, so they're not going to give you up broken ranks. But your point is valid. Your point is very valid. You are building to counter right now, what we've got Stormcast, we've got Daughters, we've got Lumineth, you've got KO. Although they're not going to sort you out with KO. You know, there's Cities of Sigmar. Probably less than half the field is going to shoot you. So, is those 75 points valuable? I think you've raised a good question.
I think that it depends on how you build a list, right? Like I try to build a list that has no wiggle room for fat, right? That has very little fat, if not none at all. So everything has a purpose. Everything has a reason why it's in the list. So being able to have the bats means to me like there's fat in my list, unless you do specifically want to go for that kind of method. Like, you know, I'm bringing these for X, Y, and Z. However, again, you bring 2 units of fell bats. Yeah, they're really useful for certain things. But if you're fighting against a shooting army and you go second, for example, they very well might just be shot off the table before you can use them, because they're 3 wounds each, and they have no save or a 6-up save, I believe.
Yeah, it'd be 6-up at best.
Yeah. So it makes it a little hard for me to want to run them. And that's just me personally. I think the points that you just mentioned are very, very valid. Savage Spearhead, being able to negate Unleash Hell if need be, where need be, super duper helpful. I think it's more of a how your tastes run, you know?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've been having some conversations with some other death players, and I think for me, maybe a unit of doggos. If you're looking for a screen,
Yes.
if you're looking for something to help unleash hell, I'd probably be more putting those. I know it's battle line, so you are going to give up broken ranks if it dies, but you probably get a bit more versatility and utility using dire wolves over a block of fell bats. But because at least they'll keep up with they'll keep up and screen your zombie dragon. It'll screen your blood knights, and being summonable, you can take advantage of coming back to life and all that good stuff.
Well, the kicker is then you bring Chadakar, and then you just have a summonable unit of dogs, and they don't count for broken ranks because they are not a chosen unit. They are not a chosen battle line unit. So they become incredibly helpful when it comes to Unleash Hell or really any of these kind of a Blade of Wounds, Bubble Wrap, etc. Because then you can just throw them at the opponent, and hopefully they survive at least 1 round. If they can survive at least 1 round of combat or 1 round of shooting, which, to be frank, more often than not they do, that's very helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's the challenge, right? It's the benefit and the curse of books like this, because I'm a Cities player, right? So I know how many rabbit holes you can go down, and I think you've got a lot of cool options, right? You know, people are talking in the chat, you know, what do we think of Lucavi? You know, you talked about Radika or Chadaka. We haven't talked about Neferata. We haven't talked. There's so many great heroes as well as lots of units. It really comes down to the start of the decision tree. What's that dynasty you're going to pick? You know, how do you start kind of thinking about what brings you to the table? If you love your Blood Knights, you can really build around Blood Knights. And I think there's viable builds in Blood Knights. You love your zombies. One thing I think people a lot, and I'd love your thoughts on this. People talked about Graveguard. People talk about zombies. Not a lot of people talk about Skellies. I think the Humble Skelly still has a place in the meta. And I still think it's a sleeper little good unit. Maybe not like the old block of 40 you used to run with Van Hales, and you know you use the spears for the double attacks and all that stuff. But but I think a lot of people went really quickly to kind of not talking about the Skelly.
Well, that's the reason why I keep them on my list rather than some other battle line, right? So my battle line in, like, say, my SoCal list.
All right, I'm just going to bring it up. All right, I'm going to bring it up. Let's stop teasing the chat. Let's bring it up. Let's bring it up. There we go. Ooh, hey, there's a new view. Let's do that one. Oh no.
I like that. I like that.
No, because it blocks off the battalion. So let's just go this way. So here is this list that Alex keeps talking about. It went 5-0 at SoCal. It is likely going to be your Warhammer Austin list.
Yeah.
And here we are, Nice Day. We've got Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, Chadaka or Radika the Beast. You got Mannfred. You got a unit of 2 units of Skellies of 10, 1 unit of Dire Wolves, 2 units of Graveguard. And this is an interesting one for me as well, because early on I saw people talking about 2 blocks of Graveguard, and I wondered if it was too many points. So I'm sure you're going to explain to me more about your thinking and how and why.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned skeletons just because I use those instead of some other bare minimum battle line. My previous list did have a unit of 20 skeletons in them as like backfield objective scoring, but that is when I had Graveguard count as battle line as well due to a White King general. And skeletons have a lot of legs, especially when it comes to their own objective scoring, because if you have your entire army up in front, and if your opponent has like let's say Daughters of Cain, if they have like Canary, Canary Heartrenders or something like that, and they charge a unit, they deep strike, they charge a unit, that unit, if they get hit, just make sure you don't activate first so that you can bring X number of models back, right? It's incredibly helpful, incredibly useful. Skeletons do not hit well at all. They hit like Mortec Guard, but weaker. And they're there to exist and nothing more. So having a big unit of them or two smaller units can be very useful, and I think is has a lot of utility. But with this list in particular, bringing the double unit of Graveguard, I am yet to find out that is it's never not been useful for me. Worst case scenario, a unit dies very quickly, and then maybe I can bring 10 of them back in as like a harassing unit. But they almost always outperform things that I need. Things that I needed to kill, they either die by that or they die to the zombie dragon. So in like one go, very more often than not, the 20 unit of Graveguard, if they're all in combat or even half in combat with an extra attack, usually will kill the thing that I need dead. And I think that especially now that Stormcast have gotten their FAQ and they're going to be showing up a lot more in tournaments. I haven't fought too many games against new Stormcast yet, only maybe 2 games max so far, one of which was pre-FAQ and the rules weren't really fully understood either. So there were some things that weren't correct, which happen when you're learning a new army, but in a practice game. But I think that the combination of mortal wounds and 2 damage is going to be helpful. 1 rend hurts. I mean, like, it is what it is. This entire book doesn't have a ton of rend 2 or rend 3, but mortal wounds on 6s and 2 damage, incredibly helpful against, let's say, Stormkeep Stone what's the word I'm looking for? Stormkeep, Vindicators, Liberators, etc. that you really need to munch through.
Yeah, even the Mega Gargant, right? I think it's one way that you're going to pull down a Mega Gargant, because outside of the Graveguard, there's not a lot of things that you have to pull down that Amulet of Destiny Mega Gargant, who may have even got 40 wounds with the 5-up, ward save. But when you think about the Graveguard with the 2 attacks, doing mortals on 6s, getting any abilities like getting the +1 attack from either the, Mannfred, or even like the humble little Vampire Lord on foot, then if you bring in the White King, and I want to ask you, like, why no White? Why did you drop the White King? And even like, why did you not even take the little Vampire Lord on foot? I feel like he is a perfect support piece for the Graveguard.
Well, that's a great question. And I have played all of those in different lists before, and I wasn't unhappy with them. I just am happy with this one right now. I will probably go back to them pretty soon, or at least after November. The White King was incredibly helpful for the rerolling ones rerolling ones to hit for the friendly death rattle unit, like a unit of skeletons that might already be getting +1 to hit. However, again, same thing as before. 20 Graveguard are a bit of a glass hammer. So if your opponent knows for a fact that they're going to be able to kill them, which if they have like a central unit, a really kind of hammer unit, they probably will. If it's a unit of say 4 Fulminators or an Ironclad or something like that, right? You can just point and click, and as long as you roll average, you're probably going to kill the unit. If that's a pretty easy broken ranks, and not only is it a broken ranks, but it's also a unit that is very offensive. So it's kind of a free battle tactic that you're giving away. At least I found that to be the case. And then the regular Vampire Lord, I absolutely love. The first variation of my former Vyrkos list with double Vengorian Lord, dropping them and replacing them with a zombie dragon, I had some points to spare, and I had actually replaced Radikar also with a I had replaced the I'd replaced it, 2 Vengorian Lords with a Zombie Dragon. I had replaced Radakar with a Coven Throne, and then I had replaced, while keeping Belladama there, I had replaced the White King, White Lord or White King, with a Zombie Dragon, or a Vampire Lord, which was very helpful for the +1 attack, like you mentioned, against Graveguard. In addition to that, the debuff mechanics on a Coven Throne can be incredible. However, it's incredibly situational. But for 1 CP, she can make it. That Coven Throne can make as a White King or a Graveguard unit, +1 to hit, +1 to wound, and +1 save, makes them kind of terrifying. So without the use of Mannfred.
I was literally about to say, it feels like you either want the Coven Throne or you want Mannfred. You don't want to do both. You can do both, obviously, but it's a lot. It's a big point sink to be buffing up something that maybe you're better off having an extra block of Graveguard. And I think you mentioned a really good point as well, that if you only have 1 unit of Graveguard, opponents get wised up and they see the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, they see the Graveguard. They're the 2 things that people want to pull down pretty quickly. But by having a second unit of Graveguard, you've got 3 key threats. Plus, you've got Mannfred, who can pop up all around the battlefield. You've obviously got Radakar as well, that probably takes up those points for the Vampire Lord. Because, if you're going to add a Vampire Lord or a White King on foot, where the points come from, Radakar is certainly one of those models that are taking up those points.
Yeah, well, really, it was Mannfred, because before this, I hadn't actually run Mannfred. I had run Belladama plus probably a Vampire Lord or something like that. I am, the ability for +1 attack is so helpful. But really, that's the only reason why I would bring a Vampire Lord. And with the combination of Geistivore and the combination of Radakar, hopefully getting the charge off, you want to make sure that he doesn't get intercepted. Of course, I kind of didn't really feel like I needed a Zombie Dragon, a Vampire Lord in this list, solely to the fact that I had 2 other mechanics to get additional attacks. One that was a little bit more situational, one that I had a lot more control over.
And by the way, it looks like Raymond from SoCal is in the chat as well. So Raymond was 5-0 as well. So you guys were at the top of the tree. I think they were wishing for maybe round 6 where you 2 could fight off each other to see
someday
who is. Let's make it happen.
Yes, someday.
Lock it in. Lock it
someday
in.
We'll
not
lock
Tabletop
it in.
Simulator.
Man, Tabletop Simulator is really helpful, especially in the pandemic. It helps scratch the itch a little bit, but
it's no replacement.
It's absolutely no replacement. No, not at all. Not at all.
I can't look at the table as well as I can on the real battlefield. Like you put me in real life, and I'm like old school Warhammer where I can guess the ranges because you had to in like cannons and things. But like on Tabletop Simulator, I'm a potato. I can't read the table field. Like I don't know my charge range. I'm just like, what is going on? But this is not the Tabletop Simulator show. Why the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon and not Prince V? Why not Prince Vordry? And is it just a points issue or is there something more?
The fact that there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Vordry is really fun. He's got the mortal wounds for his range. He's got he hits like a brick shithouse, and he's very hardy. He is also 20 points more than a Zombie Dragon, right? And that's not the kicker. That's not the reason why I don't run him. I don't run him here because if I run a Soulblight list, I want at least two generals, right? And in Vyrkos, it's the easiest one of all of them, like we mentioned before, to have 2 generals because every single named character counts as your general, unless in Legion of Night, it's Mannfred, 380 points. Legion of Blood, Neferata, 360 point extra model. Prince Vordry, 455 point, right? So it becomes really challenging to kind of fit the extra model in to have 2 generals, unless you run Vyrkos. And really, I don't consider Radakar 315 points. He is 180 points to me, because as long as he doesn't get shot off the board turn 1, which is kind of hard to do, to be frank.
It's 4 up armor save, 12 wounds. I mean, KO could do it.
Then you're all maybe out defense.
Or you just screen him, like you hide him, and hopefully, Don't be a potato and put him right at the front. Like, oh, he can run it. He can run and charge. He's going to be like a super missile up the board. Oh wait, no, he dies.
No, he absolutely dies. Yeah. No, he is someone you want to protect until you don't need to anymore. And then you can make him Hulk out, and he becomes a fun time. But being able to the zombie dragon, there's a lot of different reasons to run him. Chief among them is the fact that with him and Radikar, it becomes 2 generals on the table. The Death Lance is a good one of those rare occasions where you can have more than 1 rend. Of course, on the charge with a 14-inch move, he becomes 2 rend, and I chose flaming weapons. So on the charge, that lance, that Death Lance, is 2 rend, 5 damage. So you more often than not, if I'm charging multiple things, and I have a problem where if I spread out, and this is just more of a luck thing for me, let's call it superstition. I feel like if I chain out all my attacks on multiple units, I'm not going to do a lot of anything to any of them. But if I dedicate everything to one thing, more often than not, I'll kill it. So if I'm doing like Slay the Warlord and I'm in combat with multiple units, I'm going to dedicate the zombie dragon and all of his attacks to that chosen general to get Slay the Warlord with the bonus point. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and the lance alone killed him, and then the jaws and the claws, sword-like claws, don't even matter. So, but he did what he needed to do. That's an extra point. It's incredibly helpful. You've potentially screwed over your opponent on certain things that he needed for their battle tactics, or the way that they chose, really expected to play, and being able to do potentially 15 damage with just 3 attacks, let alone the rest of the attacks that the zombie dragon has, is terrifying to a lot of people. In addition to that, obviously Amulet of Destiny for the 5-up shrug or 5-up ward. And then, Pack Alpha is the kind of unsung hero, I think, of the entire book. Being able to use a command point without a command point being spent for that one character who is also your chosen general. So command abilities have an 18-inch bubble on your chosen general. That's super, super, super helpful in more ways than one. And again, it's in a turn, you can use 1 command point without it being spent, your opponent's turn and your turn. So in one battle round, you're basically using 2 free CP. That's potentially 10 free CP over the course of 5 rounds. So that compared to any other command trait has been the most useful I've seen in the entire book.
And your army, when I look at it, between Mannfred and Radikar and all the other different things in your army, you could be very CP hungry at times, especially when you're setting that up right. Radikar, when he goes for the charge, he can do that sweet bubble to get the +1 attacks. You've got Mannfred's aura bubble, which you definitely want to have on. Happen to need it for a re-rolling a charge or all-out attack or some type of CP. You've got a lot of really good options, I guess, is my point. Is you've got a lot of good options to burn CP on.
Yeah. So the free CP is super helpful, because of that exact same reason. And then, so you're actually you're mentioning, and I'm sure you've already realized that, but so I appreciate that you set that up. Basically, this list, I tried to build it in a way that made things, that made sure that I had almost, it's weird, it's funny to say ablative command points, but there are a lot of things that become like you get more bang for your buck, right? You're using more and spending less, right? So Mannfred, if he's around a certain number of units, if he's around at least 3 units or 2 units, and you're using his +1 to hit and +1 to wound, then you're essentially already almost doubling or tripling or even quadrupling the number of kind of all-out attacks that you would have gotten. So that becomes incredibly helpful. Being able to use the extra CP from the zombie dragon as well, that can potentially be, 5 extra all-out attacks or something like that you may not have utilized otherwise. So yeah, it is exactly, it's about kind of optimizing the amount of benefit that you can utilize for your command points. And even with this, more often than not, I use all my command points by the end of the round still.
Are you finding that you're mostly running around with because the way I'm imagining your lists on the table is you've got your 2 blocks of Graveguard, maybe they're on either side, and then you've got almost like the Mighty Ducks formation where you've got maybe Mannfred at the back, you've got, Radikar at the front, you get the wings of Graveguard. Is that how you're kind of building like an offensive castle to kind of make the most of all of your bubbles, because that Radica 18-inch bubble is quite generous. Mannfred's bubble is quite generous, and you notice in AOS 3, 18 inches doesn't sound a lot, but when you look at the smaller table size, it does actually cover a fair amount of the board. Is that how you're kind of using them, or are you using like one at a time, or are you doing it all at the same time?
I want to make sure I have the question right. You're asking whether or not I use all my command points all at the same time?
I'm more talking about like your Mannfred bubble and your Radica bubble. Are you trying to like spend all your CP in this absolute all-out offensive attack, or are you kind of like doing layers? So you might kind of go in with wave 1, which is Radica, because his benefit is based on the charge, and then you kind of go in with the units, and then maybe Mannfred is second, or how are you kind of using it all together? I think maybe I'm not articulating my question the best.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so really, I try my best to think like old vampire count, right? So this army is, especially since there is the glass hammer mechanic to it, you have a lot of temptation to be as offensive as possible, to jump right into your opponent's line and just hit them as hard as you can, which in some instances is very helpful. And again, going back to my experience with, say, Night Haunt, that's exactly how I would play. I would play hyper aggressive. I would try to pin my opponent down while I score the objective in other areas, and kind of have the ability to do what I want when I want to. Which still, it was a little bit of a risk, but at least you can like bubble wrap and zone things out with a lot of deep strikes. With this army, I like to be a little bit more reactionary. And obviously, being more reactionary is usually a safer bet in a lot of different armies. However, in an army like this, I try my best to make sure that I can have control as to when I make the charge. And sometimes that means, especially against Stormcast now too, sometimes that means that you bubble wrap to avoid, say, Annihilator, Deep Strike, Mortal Wound spam, and you lose a lot of skeletons, a lot of Graveguard, maybe even. You can throw the Graveguard down without even thinking about wanting to charge with them. They're holding objectives. There's something that the opponent now has to deal with. And if they die, c'est la vie. If they don't, wonderful. And honestly, you have to understand that you're going to sacrifice units, right? And again, going back to the old vampire counts kind of play style. So I try to be reactionary, and sometimes I like to just throw a unit that even a 280 point 20-man Graveguard unit, sometimes I like to throw them into my opponent's face to not necessarily confuse them, but to be like, this is something that's here now. Now you got to deal with it. You have 2 units. I've hit you at a weird angle. You have maybe 3 units that can attack me. I have about 3 or 4 units that can attack you with a 25 mil base. But and yeah, you have your big scary things that now have to go over and deal with this. But now they have to go over and deal with that instead of doing other things, like scoring the objectives. So there's that game. I want to say that kind of secondary game, that meta game of trying to play for the mission rather than playing against your opponent.
And that's certainly an AOS 3 mindset. I think the first thing I'm noticing, and I'm actually running a games day tomorrow, and we've just been in lockdown for like 14 weeks, and we're all kind of slowly coming out of it. I've had some IRL games. A lot of my community hasn't had a lot of IRL games. And one of the things that you notice very quickly is that in Age of Sigmar 2, it was about being aggressive early. It was about getting up into the middle of the table, and it was definitely, that was kind of the mindset. You are noticing in 3rd edition, people are holding back a little bit more. They are being a bit more reactively, a bit more counterplay. And it's probably why as well, a lot of armies like the Bow Snake, Daughters of Cain, like, the Lumineth are loving it, because people aren't being as aggressive. And then the Iron Jaws come in and they're the ultra aggressive. Gorg runners are just going to smash you in the face. So I think the key here is that, and I kind of got the answer that I was looking for, and it was that you never have one particular game plan. It's not about, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. A good player looks at his tools and goes, right, I'm going to pull the right tool for the right situation. I'm not going to always protect my Graveguard, because what's valuable to me right now is actually the skeletons or Radica, because of this reason.
Yeah, the matchup is super important. And that brings up a point that I'm actually relatively I don't want to say concerned about, but something that I need to honestly test against. I've only played a handful of games against new orcs, right? New war clans. And I kind of already figured that they were going to FAQ Gore Gruntas to give them the Ren 2. And lo and behold, they did for the spears. And so I have a lot of people I know that like to run a lot of min units of Gore Gruntas, a lot of them. So they're going to hurt, but it is what it is, right? And I honestly am really excited to try to see what I can do to be reactionary to that hyper aggressive army. To see how things do. That Lumineth and potentially new Stormkeep, I think, are going to be the hardest matchups.
I just had a game of Stormkeep, and it is hard, when you got those 5 Vindicators who are, sitting on the objective, counting as 3. They've got a stupid armor save. They've got a ward save as well. Even I think Stormkeep is very, very tough. Sons of the Storm got some good things as well when you've got like Lord Bastion. But I think to your point, the meta is slowly shifting, and it's becoming the story of durability, not just damage. And you can only imagine what Nurgle's going to bring to the table pretty soon. So is this a time? And I love that you've got the Direwolves in the list, because with the Brutes stopping you from scoring while you've got 1 wound models, all of your models are 1 wound, right? Your Graveguard, your Skellies, they're all 1 wounders, but your Direwolves are going to kind of avoid that. But does that mean maybe with the Gore Grunters, if that becomes really popular, and I can almost guarantee it will, because people love running their pickies, love it. Is it time to bring in the block of 60 zombies? Is that the kind of screen that you need to protect your force? Or is it going to be some other type of shenanigans? I don't know what you're thinking, or if you've had some thoughts, but it's certainly something to consider. How do I handle something that's going to want to be 1 or 2 drops?
1 or 2 drops is just kind of a thing that I feel like you have to deal with. Unless you, with Soulblight, it is a little hard to do like a 1. It's definitely hard to do a 1 drop. It's also hard to do a 2 drop. It just becomes a really, really big kind of difficulty to try to get the things that you need in, especially things that can pack a punch, right? Because you do want like your zombie dragon or something, some type of equivalent. And if you run 1 or more of those, like Mannfred, when he makes a charge, like we talk about him disappearing, he is pretty hardy in combat too. So when you make the charge and you're going to charge with him, he can do a lot of damage, right? And so really it's all about when he gets into a combat where he doesn't want to be, then you're allowed to just bounce out and do whatever the fuck you want, or whatever you want. Pardon my French.
So it doesn't matter. We're all good now.
Oh, wonderful. So yeah, really being able to try to understand your opponent's army is very helpful. And that's definitely why, dragons are going to be horrible.
And that scares the crap out of me, is what is being said in the chat as well. Things like the Stormcast dragons coming in, the Storm Drake Guard, however they, should they stay at the same amount of points, the amount of mortal wounds that they're going to be able to put out. And obviously you've got some good stuff. You've got your Deathless, you've got the ability to summon and regenerate. And again, does that then lead us into a bit more of a durable horde? Does that lead me more into Skellies, Doggos, zombies? At least because otherwise those mortal wounds and those shooting attacks are going to pull down my key pieces.
You're going to have to. As much as, again, people do like Blood Knights, and I have, I think, a unit of 5 that I'm working on right now. I already have a unit. I have 10 of them already. As much as they're gorgeous models and they are good right now, because the Stormkeep exists and because Nurgle is probably around the corner with a lot of resiliency as well, a unit of 5 Blood Knights, even a unit of 10 Blood Knights fully buffed up, aren't going to do a lot of damage to, say, 10 Vindicators, 10 Liberators, etc. Oh, Liberators maybe a little bit more so, but Vindicators, or even the 2-up armor save type character or models, the Paladin keyword models, you're not going to do a lot of damage to. And sure, they're 3 wounds with a 3-up or a 4-up save, going to a 2-up or a 3-up. And yeah, if they're Hammerfall or whatever, you're going to have that potential for a 6-up shrug save. But FAQ fixing things, I have not fought post FAQ Stormcast yet, so part of this is me just assuming. But prior to this, I had I had fought against the the general who was the chosen general being a knight incanter, or the knight something or other on a dragon, and they had the command trait of table wide -1 to wound, and before, of course, it was any model, not just the dragons. And so, I would fight against a unit of 2 dragons, a unit of 1 dragon, and the character dragon. And so being able to have them all be -1 to wound made sense. But then the whole army was also -1 to wound, which was incredibly difficult to deal with. So now that I know that I don't have to worry about that anymore, things might be a little different. But you are right. I think that with these new resilient, hard to kill, hard to move armies that are going to be all about scoring, things like, unfortunately, Blood Knights are going to be a little harder. You're going to have a much more uphill battle. You're going to have to be able to swarm. Mm-hmm.
Or you go one unit. You go one unit that supports maybe your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, but you don't go all in. And I think to the point, just to clarify, when I say durable hordes, I'm not talking like a horde with a mad armor save. The Soulblight version of a durable horde is 60 zombies. 60 zombies that are coming back on a 2+ that can come back at the end of the battle shock phase. That's a different version of durability, which is going to be the same type of style of Nurgle. It's just Nurgle does it a whole lot better than Soulblight.
Well, I mean, you want to talk about durable? I mean, you could do 10 units of 10 dogs, and you still got 700 points to deal with. Or no, you still have 650 points of whatever you want after 100 dogs.
They are paper, but they're more durable than, I don't know, the Gloomspite Gits horde.
This mention the comment here about 60 zombies are paper. You're right. You are absolutely correct. They are super easy to go through. And I had played a few games where I tested out zombies as well at the start. And I was told the error of my ways by a friend of mine after I had played a few games, against Jeremy, and I had maybe a unit of 20 and a unit of 40 zombies. I'd run 60 total. Then, I was taken aside and told, if you're going to run zombies, run a minimum of 120, right? Mm-hmm. You have to have them cover your entire territory. And if they're not doing that, then that's not enough zombies. They will die. You need maybe a unit of 60, a unit of 40, and 2 units of 20. Right?
It's a Gloomspite Gits. It's a Gloomspite Gits. I used to run blocks of 60, 40, and 20s, and it wasn't just one unit. It was a wave and a horde, and it was just bodies everywhere. You're blocking off objectives. Obviously, there's a lot of debuff in Gits, but that was the style. And you're right. It's not just one. If you go down that route, it's having many options.
Yeah.
But, do you want to paint, 160, 200 zombies? Do you want to move them around the table? Is that, for some people, it's probably not their most exciting part of the hobby.
No. I mean, that's why, I think my summoned zombie dogs are just spirit dogs, 3-color minimum, ghost colors. The other ones I put a lot of more detail and attention to, but oh boy, can it be a bit of a nightmare to try to paint those? Somebody in the chat mentions, who the F wants to build.
Yeah, I brought up Alex.
Yeah. Then hopefully you've gone online, you've gone on eBay, you've found pre-painted used minis that you don't think are too ugly and that you want to run. I just did that myself. I want to experiment with a ton of zombies. So I had built and painted 40 zombies. But then after spending an entire week painting 4 zombies just meticulously, I went, I'm not going to run these. I'm almost never going to run these. Why did I just spend so much time on that? So then I bought 60 more the other day, and it was they were used, they were painted. As long as the mold lines aren't there, which is a big kicker for me.
Just contrast. Just contrast the horde. Beautiful zombies, but it's like pushing shit uphill. There's only so much. You're they're going to die pretty quickly. Let me put the effort into heroes. I think for me, when I look at Soulblight, there is the ideas are starting to emerge. When I very first had this conversation with Matt Tyrrell, there were some ideas, right? It was very early on in Age of Sigmar 3, and the meta has started to settle. We've started to see the hero hammer. We've started to see shooting. We're starting to see durability. The armies that are starting to become popular is becoming a lot clearer. And I think we're in this phase now that we are going to move into something a bit more durable. People are sick of getting mortal wounds. You're either dealing mortal wounds or you need to handle mortal wounds. And I think this is a great way that your book has flexibility. You've got such a deep roster. that you can flex and you can move as the meta shifts, which is, again, a trait that I've really enjoyed with cities compared to some of my armies that are whole, they're either hot or they're not.
Yeah. And I actually think that there's going to be a wave 2. That's just my inkling. I have no prior information behind that, but I think that there's going to be a wave 2 for Gravelords, just because there's got to be a new zombie dragon model around the corner, and I would not be shocked if just because of the cover art and a few other things that make me kind of think maybe a year from now, I wouldn't be surprised if we came out with something new. But yeah, I really, really want to see what they do next. They have too many. It's almost like they have two. I think there are more heroes than non-hero units in the book, which it would be good to get a little bit more of an expansion.
So the Stormcast problem is like, a whole 2 pages of points just purely to heroes. Because you've also got the Cursed City stuff as well that, isn't quite technically released. But hey, at least we've kind of broken it up now, and you don't have to take them as one 700-point block of like, why would you do that when you take in the gash? But I think for me, just overall, I think you're in a good spot. You are doing quite well competitively. A lot of Soulblight. Is there one particular build? No, it looks like there's multiple different versions. Whether you go the Alex style, which is a double grave guard. I've seen Belladama. I've seen, Mannfred, no Mannfred. I've seen Prince Vordry, Nagash, no Nagash. There's a lot of cool options. So however you want to build. And again, like if you want to go top tier, Alex, is it about dealing mortal wounds? If you want to go like the highest that you can possibly at a tournament, what are you building towards?
Well, if you want to specifically, I actually was thinking about this the other day. There's not a lot of like mortal wound generation in the army outside of Vordry's breath, Nagash. People want to think zombies are mortal wound blenders. They are absolutely not. Absolutely, even with the +1 attack, +2 attack, even +3 attacks, it's not really that great. I think that you need to look at, as silly as I say it, potentially Avangori with like 2 Terror guys plus something else. Do I think that's good? No. I think that maybe you still want to bring the Grave Guard. Maybe if you're running Kalistari, maybe a unit of Grave Guard, 2 units of, or maybe 1 or 2 units of Blood Knights, and then something else to fill out your battle line, and then Vordry. That honestly might be the most useful tool if you're explicitly going for mortal wounds. If you're going in that particular direction, you're a little limited. I mean, part of it is also that objective scoring mechanic. Like you need to spend X number of points on boots on the ground, right? So that again goes back to the reason why I don't use 3 units of skeletons and save those extra points. That's why I keep the unit of 10 dogs in, because I know I can summon 10 more later. That's 40 wounds, 10 or 20 models with a 5-up save. And you're probably bringing at least one of those units back once a game, and they're not the easiest unit to chew through. So even a Stonehorn might not even be able to chew through a unit on the charge. So it's a risk, but it's good to try to have those boots on the ground.
Yeah, and as Triple Herb said, I think generally you are in a really good spot. There's only a few. When I look at the book, there's probably only a few units that I wouldn't take. My Black Knights probably are going to stay on the shelf just that little bit longer. There was a day back in the day, the Black Knights were the thing. 15 Black Knights come back from the Gravesite for a CP. They were hot, and now they're not.
Black Knights are in a bad spot. I mean, they're battle line the Legion of Blood, but if you want to run a Legion of Blood, you're already. I mean, I've messed around with Neferata. You mentioned, of course, we talked about Legion of Blood lists and how they're not my favorite, but I love Neferata as a model. She's the cheapest Martok character in the book, just by 15 points. But pardon me, 25 points. But still, she's I've killed chosen generals with the Dagger of Jet, but and healing D6 wounds with the Hunger rather than D3 is incredibly helpful. But still, you're playing Hero Hammer, I think, if you're playing Legion of Blood. So you have to kind of rely on all those buffs. The +1 armor save +1 armor save on the zombie dragon to give them a natural 2-up, a -1 to hit with shooting weapons. Like if you're running that kind of list, like you already have to think like, okay, I'm trying to mess around against shooting armies. But I think that there's like you mentioned before, there's not a lot of consistency with what works in terms of lists.
No, they call it the scissor paper rock, folks. If you've heard people like, on the internet talk about the scissor paper rock, it means that, there's no particular list that you're building to handle. So, if it was like Stormcast, for example, and they are just, if we were in 40K, right? And we're like, it's this absolute one. Alex knows better than I do. I'm not a 40K player, but in 40K, there's like usually one or two army that are just absolutely hot in the meta, and you just need to handle that army or not. And you just hope that you don't kind of get paired up against them. But for us, I could kind of, try to build a list around handling, I keep mentioning the bow snakes, right? Bow snakes and lumineth archers. And I build a really cool list, but then the iron jaws smash me in the face, or the cruel boys shoot off my monsters with some big damage. So I think that's the kind of thing. And I keep giving people advice, is like, play your style, build around what you like, and focus more on the objective rather than how do I defeat X, Y, Z, because especially for players who are less experienced, you'll go around in circles. You just, because every army that you're trying to handle is just fundamentally different.
Yeah. Cautionary. I mean, like, if I were to share a cautionary tale here, prior, I did great at SoCal, won with battle points more than any other player. SOS was apparently ahead of battle points, so that's why tied for, or got first, tied, got second. But
5-0, top of the tree, Alex.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But the tournament before that, my very first round, I was helping out another Soulblight Gravelord player. It was a mirror match, and he was new to the faction, and I was trying to explain some mechanics, but also I got cocky, and I went, okay, cool. Well, I don't need to do X, Y, and Z. Well, then, hey, that's an easy way to lose the mission, right? Because you're thinking less about how am I going to win this game, and in a competitive setting, and more like I need to show what these things can do. So that becomes a whole nother thing of like, especially in a competitive, like in a beer and pretzels or practice game, being able to like show the ropes to someone rather than like being like, cool, I need to now play this game, because right after that I had gone straight into the belly of the beast afterwards, and it was not a great weekend. But but being able to have the flexibility that you have in these kind of armies is very useful. Again, they're not the strongest army. It really is player dependent. Soulblight Gravelords. There's no like OP list, OP build, Yeah, no, I would agree. A couple of elevator, like last kind of final questions, and we'll kind of wrap things up. Raymond definitely wants that game. I can't wait. I'm gonna maybe I should book you all on a show. Like we'll have like a boxing pay-per-view. We'll kind of put it on stream. A couple of quick elevator questions before we kind of wrap up. One, corpse cart, yay or nay? Depends on the list. I would say yay if you're bringing a magic heavy list. That +1 to cast is amazing. If you have it with Nagash and being +4 to cast with Nagash, it's wonderful.
What about the Mortis engine?
I built a list that was literally 4 Mortis engines, a bunch of bodies, and minor like infantry level characters. I showed it to a few people. They were like, the reactions went from everything to fuck that list to I hate that list, you should feel bad. So I am yet to try it out, but actually it was 3 Mortis engines and the Palanquin. I'm talking about the not Coven Throne.
the vampire Coven Throne, essentially.
Yeah, so that you can count one as being a hero because it's got the Wailing Doom as well. It's really fun. The only issue that I have is the fact that there is no FAQ on this, but when you unleash hell, you have to unleash hell on that one unit, and they have a range attack, and it's an AoE, but you still only target that one unit. So it would be really fun if you just AoE'd it as well again. But I like the Mortis engine if you were to just run a dumb spam list. Otherwise, it's too many points.
That's some crack science. And the last question, and if you enjoyed this show, folks, one like, comment, go check out Alex. He's got the In Your Face podcast. It's not just a podcast. It's like a network. It's like I'm waiting for my letter of offer to eventually get rolled up into your conglomerate media empire. But the last question that get asked all the time by Jonathan, who's always in the live chat, is Mega Gargant Mercenary. Pros, cons, where do you stand on bringing in a big boy to the Soulblight list? And you'd get the Gatebreaker. Gatebreaker's the death one, right?
Yeah, the Gatecrasher guy. I think that Soulblight Gravelords is the only army that doesn't need him. We in the States, we have Bill Souza, who did fantastic with I think Summer Slaughter with Feck and the Gatecrasher. There's a guy in our region. In fact, I'm going to a tournament where I might play him this weekend. A really, really good Night Haunt player as well. His name is Dirk, and he runs Night Haunt with the Gatecrasher Gargant.
I've seen it done really well with Night Haunt too.
But he's making up for the weaknesses of those two factions. With Gravelords, you could throw him in, but I don't think he's necessary. I don't think that the Gargant should be considered, because you could run for the same amount of points, or for less than that, you can run a Zombie Dragon and something else, right? And the Zombie Dragon and something else is probably a Zombie Dragon and a 20-man unit of Graveguard combined will do much more damage than one Mega Gargant, and that's what 600, just a little over 700 points. So it's going to be more than one Mega Gargant, a little bit more, but massively more effective for that army.
Yeah, because the Gatebreaker Mega Gargant is 525 right now, so it's the most expensive of the three options.
Yeah.
And would I take? Look, there's pros and cons, and I guess depending on the style of army. But I think you're right. In a lot of cases, the Graveguard or some type of if you're trying to hold objectives, I might go the block of 60 zombies. Because you lose that command point at the start of your battle in turn one. You can't artifact it, so you can't put the Amulet of Destiny on it. It only counts as 5. It doesn't count as the 20 like Suns do. So you don't get all of the benefits, or it could be another Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon or a Terrorgeist. Like I love the idea of like a Terrorgeist. Hell, give me 2 Terrorgeists in Alpha Beast pack. Let me just go straight up the board and just like rip you a new one doing 6 mortals.
Someone on Twitter asked, there was a guy on Twitter asking, what's the lowest model count Soulblight Gravelords list you can make? And for me, it was 3 Terrorgeists in Nagash. Is it a winning list? Absolutely not. Will it fuck over certain matchups? 100%. Like just nothing but mortal wounds.
That's absurd. That would be such a hilarious army. Like I remember watching on Warhammer TV once. There was like 4 Vampire Lord, or it was like a combination of like Terrorgeist and Vampire Lords on Zombie Dragon. It was just terrorizing the meta at one point. But Alex, this has been awesome. We could talk death for ages, just so deep, right? Like we could talk about Avangorian, we could talk more about the Callisti, we could talk more about we haven't talked about allies. Like I know some people have been in my Discord doing some crazy list science trying to bring in the Tomb Banshee. They're like, oh, I'm going to bring a Tomb Banshee into my list. I'm doing Mortal Wound Screams. I'm like,
okay.
I'm like, you're cheap, but I'm like, would you do it? I don't know. I don't know if I would bring in that particular model. But hey, I think that's the cool thing, right? This book is deep. It's got a lot of cool options. Choose your own flavor. Run it. Borrow. Lots of players are doing well. They're not an auto win style of army, but a lot of good stuff you can do.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
If people want to go kind of talk to Alex, 1, you got the podcast in your phase. 2, your Twitter handle is below. Go give him a follow. Let him know that I sent you or you watched him on his episode. Any shout outs, anything you want to kind of bring us home with?
If you guys are going to Warhammer Austin, I will be there. I'm not going to, I don't know what I'm going to be doing there. So, I'll be playing, but say hi. I like whiskey if you guys want to get a drink. And then, check out In Your Phase. We are going to be doing a lot more live stream formats ourselves, as well as interviews. Definitely going to have to get you on. And, that's it. Continue to watch, everything, whether it's AOS Coach or all the other content that we do have here for AOS, and learn you some games.
Well, do me a favor and go get some sweet, sweet, sweet barbecue. Little trick. I actually, not even a trick. I actually was looking at flights. So actually I'm allowed to leave my country now. So as of the 1st of November, I'm allowed to leave my country. And I actually did look at flights for Warhammer Open Austin. I'm like, Like, is it possible? I haven't got the direct flights. There's no direct flights.
No.
Unfortunately, normally I can fly direct to Austin, to Dallas, sorry, but I've got to go via LAX, and it's just bumped up the price and the time just a little bit too much. But I'm keeping an eye out. There could still be a maybe, but probably not. But I'd love to attend. But
next SoCal Open, check that out. They're usually in late October.
If not, I know I've seen Seasons of War. Jordan's got like an Airbnb happening, so I might hang out with you, Jordan, next. Maybe open up the house, go check out your 3D printers. But let's all bring it home. Thank you very much, Alex. You've been an absolute legend. I've learned a lot. It was great to hear how you have been going 5-0 with Soulblight. If you have some different ideas and some things that you want to consider, and maybe some ideas that we didn't talk about, maybe there's a particular hero, I can't remember her name. Like there's that Kaz, I don't know. So many Curse City heroes that are out there. Like if you think there's some, that one. Like let me know in the comment section. Tell me how great they are or whatever it is. But until next time, don't forget your triumph, Alex. You're a legend. Thank you for the chat.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. See you, folks. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more sixes.